My name is David Mercer, and I have been a ranger in Yellowstone National Park for 22 years. Before I tell you what happened on September 15th, 2024, before I explain why I can never leave this place now, I want you to understand something very clearly. If you're watching this while planning a trip to Yellowstone, if you're one of those adventurous souls who wants to see the parts of the park that aren't in the brochures, you need to hear this. What I'm about to tell you could save your life, or at least save you from becoming something that isn't quite alive anymore. Before continuing, if you subscribe and like the video, you will be contributing greatly to the continuation of new stories to come. And I'm curious, where in the world are you watching from right now? Drop your location in the comments. Have any of you visited Yellowstone? Have you ever felt like the landscape was watching you, waiting for something? There is a 14 square mile area in Yellowstone that does not appear on any public map. It's located approximately 8 miles northeast of Old Faithful, nestled between the Firehole River and a series of unnamed thermal features that the Park Service has never officially documented. On our internal maps, it's marked as Zone 7, though most rangers call it something else when we think no one's listening. We call it the Fold. Everyone has the right to know what is really going on in Zone 7, what happens to the people who wander into it, and why the Park Service has been lying about disappearances for over 70 years. What I am about to tell you goes against every oath I swore when I put on this uniform. I signed documents. I met with people from agencies that technically don't exist. I was told that public knowledge of Zone 7 would cause mass panic, would destroy the tourism industry, would fundamentally alter how people understand reality itself. Maybe they were right. But after what happened last month, after learning that we lost 3 more hikers in the same way we've been losing them since 1953, I can no longer remain silent. This is the story the Park Service would prefer stayed buried in the same classified files as the original incident reports from the 1950s. I need to establish my credibility before I go any further. In my 22 years as a Yellowstone Ranger, I have pulled tourists out of hot springs before the water could strip flesh from bone. I have tracked lost children through blizzards that would have killed them in hours. I have performed CPR on people who had been dead for minutes and brought them back. I have a degree in wilderness management and another in geology. I am trained in search and rescue, emergency medicine, and crisis management. Before September 15th, 2024, I considered myself a rational person who had seen every variation of human foolishness and natural danger that Yellowstone could produce. I had never believed in anything I couldn't measure with instruments or explain with science. That version of me died in Zone 7. And what came back is something different, not worse, not better, just different. The first time I heard about Zone 7 was during my second week as a ranger in 2002. I was 26 years old and full of that combination of confidence and ignorance that makes young rangers dangerous to themselves. My training officer was a man named Robert Clearwater, a Shoshone ranger who had worked in Yellowstone for 38 years. Robert didn't talk much, which made the things he did say carry extra weight. We were driving past the Firehole River when he slowed the truck and pointed to a barely visible dirt road that branched off the main path. It was overgrown, barred by a simple wooden gate with a faded Park Service personnel only sign. "Never go down that road," Robert said. His voice had that flat quality that meant he wasn't making a suggestion. Not even for a search and rescue. Not even if you hear someone screaming for help. You radio it in, and you wait for the specialized team. I asked what specialized team. Robert kept his eyes on the road ahead. The team that doesn't exist on any official roster. The team that shows up in unmarked vehicles with credentials that don't match any agency anyone's heard of. I laughed. I actually laughed. I thought he was hazing the new guy with some park legend. What's down there? Secret government experiments? Bigfoot? Robert didn't laugh. He pulled the truck over and turned to look at me, and I saw something in his eyes that killed my smile. My grandfather was a medicine man. Before he died, he told me about a place in these mountains where time doesn't work right. He said the old ones made a treaty with what lives there centuries before the park existed. He said modern people broke that treaty in 1953, and that blood has been paying for it ever since. He started driving again. You'll hear the official story eventually. Geological instability, dangerous thermal features, unmarked sinkholes, all true enough. But there's more to it than that. Just stay out of Zone 7, David. Whatever you hear about it, whatever curiosity you have, just stay out. I nodded. I filed it away as the kind of superstitious talk that happens in isolated places. I forgot about it for years. The park kept me busy with normal problems. Tourists feeding bison, hikers getting lost, minor medical emergencies, the constant battle to keep people from killing themselves in a landscape that is fundamentally hostile to human life. Zone 7 became just another restricted area, no different from a dozen others marked on our maps. I saw the specialized team a few times over the years, always from a distance. They arrived in black SUVs with government plates, always at least 6 people, always wearing what looked like hiking gear, but moved like military. They would disappear down that overgrown road and return hours later with expressions that reminded me of soldiers coming back from combat. I never asked questions. In Park Service culture, you learn which questions not to ask. Robert Clearwater died in 2019 of a heart attack while off duty. At his funeral, his daughter gave me a box of his personal effects from his ranger station locker. Most of it was standard stuff, but at the bottom was a journal bound in green leather, worn soft with age and handling. The first entry was dated March 8th, 1953. It wasn't Robert's handwriting. The name on the inside cover was James Clearwater, Robert's grandfather. I sat in my truck in the funeral home parking lot and started reading. The journal was part diary, part field notes, part warning. James Clearwater had been one of the first Native American rangers hired by the Park Service, back when that was still unusual enough to be noteworthy. His entries from early 1953 described normal park business, wildlife counts, trail maintenance, tourist incidents. Then, on March 15th, 1953, everything changed. They came in the night, James wrote, military trucks, men in suits who said they were from the Atomic Energy Commission. They cordoned off an area northeast of Old Faithful and told us it was for geological surveys related to geothermal energy research. They brought equipment I didn't recognize. Drilling rigs, something that looked like radar dishes, but pointed at the ground instead of the sky. They worked for 3 days. On the 3rd day, something happened. I was 5 miles away, and I felt it. The air pressure changed. My watch stopped. When I looked toward their camp, the light was wrong. Not darker, not brighter. Just wrong. Like looking at the world through water that isn't quite transparent. The next entry was dated March 18th, 1953. 63 men went into that zone. 17 came out. the ones who came out, wouldn't talk about what happened, but I saw their faces. They looked like men who had seen the face of God and found it incomprehensible. The AEC shut down the project immediately. They brought in more people, different people, people who didn't wear uniforms but moved like soldiers. They built a gate and posted guards. I asked my supervisor what happened. He told me that I had signed secrecy agreements when I was hired, and that those agreements included things I didn't know I was agreeing to keep secret yet. He said the missing men would be listed as victims of a geological accident. He said their families would receive death benefits and sealed coffins. He said some doors, once opened, can't be closed again, only guarded. I sat in that parking lot for 2 hours, reading. James Clearwater had spent the next 40 years documenting incidents in and around Zone 7. Missing hikers, search parties that came back describing impossible things, valleys that hadn't existed on the map that morning, thermal features that appeared and disappeared, the sun setting in the north, time discrepancies, a ranger entering the zone at 2 p.m. and emerging at 6 p.m., certain that only 20 minutes had passed, his watch confirming his subjective experience even as every other clock disagreed. In 1967, a group of 4 geologists received special permission to study the thermal features in Zone 7. They entered at dawn with radio contact maintained every 15 minutes. At 11:47 a.m., they radioed that they had found something impossible. The transmission cut to static. A search team found 3 of them 2 days later, 6 miles from where they should have been, speaking in synchronized voices about how time is a web, not a line. The 4th geologist was never found. The 3 who returned were institutionalized for psychiatric care and died within 2 years, all on the same day, all at exactly 3:33 a.m. The journal entries became increasingly disturbing. James Clearwater began including details from Shoshone oral history, stories his grandfather had told him about a place in these mountains where the world was thin. The old ones called it Dagudakwi, he wrote, the folded place. They said that before the mountains rose, before the ice came and went, something vast lived here. Not an animal. Not a spirit in the way we understand spirits. A presence that exists outside of linear time, experiencing all moments simultaneously. The old ones made a treaty with it. They marked boundaries with cairns and petroglyphs. They taught their children never to enter the folded place during the thin times, the solstices, the equinoxes, the 3 days of the new moon. They said the presence wasn't hostile, but that human consciousness couldn't withstand direct contact with something that exists in all times at once. They said that to touch the presence is to become unmoored from linear time, to experience past, present, and future simultaneously until your mind shatters like ice hit with a hammer. The last entry in James Clearwater's journal was dated October 2nd, 1992, 6 months before his death. I am old now, and my time is short. I have kept watch as best I could. I have recorded 147 people who entered Zone 7 and never returned, or returned changed in ways that made them no longer entirely human. The Park Service knows. The government knows. They maintain the fiction of geological instability because the truth would crack the foundations of how people understand reality. I am passing this journal to my grandson Robert with one instruction: bear witness. The folded place will exist long after we are dust. All we can do is keep people away and remember what was lost when modern arrogance ignored ancient wisdom. I closed the journal and sat in the gathering darkness of the parking lot. I should have dismissed it as the ravings of an old man who had spent too long alone in the wilderness. I should have chalked it up to cultural mythology mixed with coincidence. I should have locked the journal away and forgotten about it. Instead, I started my own investigation. I started requesting the incident reports for every disappearance near Zone 7 going back to 1953. What I found in the Park Service archives made my blood run cold. The pattern was undeniable once you knew to look for it. Every year, between 3 and 7 people disappeared in or near Zone 7. The search reports all followed the same pattern. Initial search finds no trace despite ideal weather conditions. Extended search discovers anomalies, footprints that end abruptly in the middle of clear ground, equipment found miles from the last known position, temporal discrepancies in search team reports. Eventually, the search is called off due to geological instability concerns. Families are told their loved ones likely fell into unmarked thermal features and that recovery is impossible. Case closed. But in the classified addendums that required special clearance to access, the real reports told different stories. Search team members reporting synchronized compass failures, GPS units showing coordinates that place them in locations that don't exist on any map, temperatures dropping 60 degrees in a matter of seconds before returning to normal, voices heard calling for help in languages that include words no linguist can identify, shadows falling in the wrong direction, the sun appearing to move backward through the sky. In 1978, a search party of 12 rangers entered Zone 7 looking for a missing family of 4. 11 rangers came out. The one who stayed behind radioed a final message before his transmission dissolved into static. I understand now. Time isn't a line here. It's a web. I can see all the moments at once. I can see everyone who was ever lost here. They're not dead. They're unfolded. They exist in all the moments simultaneously. It's beautiful and terrible, and I can't come back because I'm already here in every moment that ever was or will be. The ranger who stayed was named Michael Torres. His body was never found. But for the next 15 years, hikers occasionally reported seeing a ranger matching his description in Zone 7, always at a distance, always seeming to flicker like a bad television signal, always moving in ways that defied physics, walking up vertical cliff faces, standing in the middle of boiling hot springs unharmed, appearing simultaneously in 2 locations separated by miles. I spent 3 months going through these reports. I cross-referenced them with the journal. The pattern held. Every incident in Zone 7 involved the same elements: technology failure, temporal distortion, people vanishing or returning fundamentally changed. And every incident happened during what James Clearwater called the thin times. I plotted them on a calendar: equinoxes, solstices, new moons, the 3 days leading up to each astronomical event. That's when the disappearances happened. That's when the boundaries became permeable. I should have stopped there. I should have closed the files, locked away the journal, and followed Robert Clearwater's advice to just stay out of Zone 7. But I'd spent my entire adult life as a ranger, believing that understanding leads to safety. That knowledge is power. That rational explanation can solve any problem. I was wrong. Knowledge isn't power when dealing with things that exist outside the frameworks that make knowledge possible. But I didn't know that yet. So I made a decision that changed me forever. I decided to enter Zone 7 and see for myself. September 15th, 2024. was the autumn equinox. I had taken vacation time, telling my supervisor I was visiting family in Oregon. Instead, I drove to the unmarked trailhead near the Firehole River, parked my personal vehicle in a spot hidden from the main road, and shouldered a pack containing 3 days of supplies, a GPS unit, a satellite phone, 2 cameras, a voice recorder, and James Clearwater's journal. I wore my personal hiking gear, not my uniform. If I was caught, I wanted plausible deniability. I was just a hiker who wandered off the marked trails. It was 6:17 a.m. when I stepped around the wooden gate and started down the overgrown road into Zone 7. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Yellowstone is never truly quiet. There are always birds, insects, the sound of wind through trees, the distant rumble of thermal features. But as I walked deeper into Zone 7, the ambient sound began to fade, not suddenly, gradually, like someone turning down the volume on the world. After 20 minutes of walking, I couldn't hear anything except my own breathing and footsteps. I stopped and listened. Nothing. I clapped my hands. The sound was muffled, absorbed by the air itself. I checked my GPS. It showed my coordinates as 44.4872 degree N, 110.8283 degree W, which would place me approximately 2 miles northeast of Old Faithful. But the elevation reading was wrong. It showed me at 12,947 feet. I was actually at maybe 7,500 feet. I noted the discrepancy in my voice recorder and kept walking. The road ended after another half-mile, terminating in a small clearing surrounded by lodgepole pines. In the center of the clearing were the ruins of the 1953 camp. Concrete foundations overgrown with moss, rusted equipment half buried in soil, a collapsed guard shack with a faded radiation hazard symbol on the door. I approached slowly, camera ready. The air smelled wrong here. Not bad exactly, just wrong. Like ozone mixed with something organic and sweet, like overripe fruit or flowers past their prime. The temperature was dropping. My breath began to fog, even though it was mid-morning in September and should have been in the high 60s. I checked my thermometer, 41 degrees Fahrenheit. That was wrong. It had been 63 degrees at the trailhead 20 minutes ago. I was photographing the ruins when my watch stopped. Not slowed, stopped. The second hand froze mid-sweep. I tapped the crystal. Nothing. I checked my phone. The screen showed the time as 6:47 a.m., which was impossible because I had been walking for over 40 minutes. I tried to take a photo with my phone. The camera app opened, but when I pressed the shutter button, the phone shut down completely. Just died, despite having an 87% charge when I left the truck. I switched to my standalone camera. It worked, but the images on the review screen looked wrong. The ruins were there, but in several shots there appeared to be people in 1950s-era work clothes standing near the equipment, translucent and flickering. I deleted those images and took new ones. The ghostly figures appeared again. Not people. Echoes. I was getting ready to leave the clearing when I heard the voices. Multiple voices, speaking in unison, saying words I couldn't quite make out. The voices seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, as if the air itself was speaking. I turned in a slow circle, trying to locate the source. The voices grew louder, resolving into distinguishable words, but the language was wrong. Parts of it sounded like English. Parts sounded like Shoshone, though I only knew a handful of words. Parts sounded like nothing human should be able to pronounce. Complex harmonics that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. Then I saw it. Not a person, not an animal, not anything I can adequately describe. Imagine if you could see time the way you see space. Imagine looking at something that exists in multiple moments simultaneously. Its past and present and future all visible at once, overlapping and interfering with each other like waves in water. That's what I saw at the edge of the clearing. A shape that was human, but also not human. That was solid, but also transparent. That was standing still, but also moving in a dozen different directions simultaneously. It wore clothes from different eras: 1950s military uniform, 1970s hiking gear, ranger uniform from the 1990s, civilian clothes from last year. It had multiple faces, all different people, all occupying the same space, their features blurring and blending and separating in a rhythm that had nothing to do with normal time. The thing spoke. The voice came from everywhere, from inside my own head, from the past and future simultaneously. "You're early," it said, or late. "Time is difficult here. Linear causality is a convenience, not a truth." I should have run. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, but I couldn't move. The thing's presence had weight, like atmospheric pressure, pinning me in place. "What are you?" I managed to ask. "We were the ones who came through in 53, the thing said. "We were the geologists in 67. We were Torres in 78. We were all of the 147 who entered the fold and never left. We are unmoored. We exist in all moments. Past, present, future. These are the same to us now. We are not dead. We are transformed." "How?" My voice sounded distant to my own ears, muffled by the strange acoustic properties of this place. "The presence touched us," the thing said. "The vast thing that lives in the fold, the thing your ancestors called Dagudakwi. It exists outside of time. To touch it is to become unstuck. Some of us went mad. Some of us transcended. All of us changed. We exist now in all the moments we ever occupied. We can see our births. We can see our deaths. We can see every choice we ever made and every choice we didn't make. We are the infrastructure of the fold now. We maintain the boundary. We warn those who can hear. We recruit those who are ready. Recruit for what? Guardianship. The fold must be watched. The presence must be protected from those who would exploit it. In 1953, the government tried to weaponize temporal distortion. They drilled into the boundary between normal space and the fold. They broke the ancient seals. They ignored the treaties. The backlash killed 46 men instantly, transformed the others. The presence isn't hostile, but it defends itself. It must. If humanity learned to manipulate temporal flow, the damage would ripple through all of time. Causality would collapse. Reality would become negotiable. Everything would unfold at once. I found I could move again. I took a step backward. "I'm leaving." "You already left," the thing said. "You're also still here. You will always be here now. You entered the fold during the equinox. You're marked, not transformed, not yet, but marked. You'll feel it. Time will begin to slip for you. You'll see moments that haven't happened. You'll remember futures that might be. You'll become the next guardian. That's why you really came here, even if you don't know it yet." "No," I said. "I'm just a ranger who wanted to understand." "Understanding is the first step to transformation," the thing said. "Ask James Clearwater. Ask Robert. They resisted too, but they bore witness. They kept watch. Now it's your turn." The thing began to dissipate, its overlapping moments spreading out like smoke and wind. The last thing I heard was its voice, already distant. 3 days. You have 3 days before the mark becomes permanent. Return to the fold on the third day. Make your choice, guardian or victim. There are no other options now. Then I was alone in the clearing. The temperature was normal again. My watch was working, showing 11:23 a.m., which meant I had lost nearly 5 hours. My GPS was working, but showed I was 8 miles from the clearing, in a location I hadn't visited yet, but would visit tomorrow. My satellite phone had 43 missed calls from my own number, all placed in the next 6 hours. My camera's memory card was full of images I hadn't taken yet, photos of locations deeper in the fold, photos of myself standing in places I didn't recognize, photos of the things speaking to me from angles I hadn't seen because I hadn't been standing there yet. I ran. I ran back down the overgrown road, through the silent forest that was gradually regaining its ambient sound, past the wooden gate, to my truck. It was still there. It was also not there. I could see both states simultaneously. The truck intact and the truck vandalized and stripped, the same object existing in two different time frames at once. I blinked hard, and the doubled image resolved to just the intact truck. I got in, started the engine, drove back to my apartment in Gardner. The whole drive, reality felt thin, like paper that might tear at any moment. Over the next 3 days, I experienced what the thing had warned about. Time slipped. I would be eating breakfast and suddenly remember having dinner later that day, complete with details I couldn't possibly know yet. I would be walking to my truck and see myself walking back from my truck, both moments existing simultaneously. I would answer my phone before it rang. I would reach for objects that appeared in my hand before I touched them. The mark was spreading. I could feel it in my chest, a cold spot that radiated outward like frost forming on glass. At night, I dreamed in all tenses at once, past, present, future, all happening simultaneously in a way that should have driven me insane, but instead felt almost natural. On the second day, I tried to leave Yellowstone entirely. I packed my truck with everything I owned and started driving south toward Jackson. 20 miles outside the park, the road began to loop. I would drive forward, but find myself back where I started, as if space itself was folding back on itself. After the third loop, I gave up. The fold had claimed me. I could no more leave its gravitational pull than the moon could leave Earth's orbit. On the third day, September 18th, 2024, I returned to Zone 7. This time, I wore my uniform. This time, I brought nothing except James Clearwater's journal. The walk to the clearing felt both endless and instantaneous. The thing was waiting for me, or rather, all of the 147 transformed people were waiting. Their individual identities blurred into a collective presence. "You came back," they said. "I don't have a choice," I said. "You always have a choice. You can refuse. You can become like us, unmoored, existing in all moments, transformed beyond humanity. Or you can accept the mark and become a guardian, half in time and half out, watching the boundary, protecting the presence, warning those who need warning. What's the difference? Guardians maintain individual identity. Guardians can still interact with linear humans. Guardians can still have a life, even if it's a life lived with one foot in multiple timelines. But guardians are bound. They cannot leave. They cannot speak the full truth. They must watch forever, or until another takes their place. I thought about Robert Clearwater, who had worked at Yellowstone for 38 years and never left. I thought about his father, James, who had kept watch for 40 years and died with his boots on. I thought about how many guardians there must have been over the centuries maintaining the boundary between linear time and the fold, protecting humanity from a truth it wasn't ready to understand. I accept, I said. The thing reached toward me with hands that existed in multiple moments and touched the cold spot in my chest. The sensation was indescribable. Imagine ice and fire at the same time. Imagine feeling every moment of your life simultaneously. Imagine understanding, just for an instant, how time is actually structured, not as a line, but as a vast web of causality, every moment connected to every other moment, past and future, mutually defining each other in an eternal present. When I could see normally again, I was alone. The clearing was empty, but I was changed. I could feel it. I existed in multiple time frames now, though not as completely as the 147. I could see a few seconds into the future, just enough to know what was about to happen before it happened. I could remember moments that hadn't occurred yet. I could sense temporal disturbances in the fold, and I was bound. I tried to walk back toward the trailhead and felt resistance, like trying to push through water that got thicker with every step. I could go about 15 miles from the fold's epicenter before the resistance became insurmountable. I was anchored here now. That was 3 months ago. In that time, I've prevented 4 people from entering Zone 7 during thin times. I've filed reports attributing their near misses to wildlife encounters or getting turned around on trails. I've started my own journal, continuing the record that James Clearwater began 71 years ago. I've learned to live with the temporal slippage, the doubled vision, the memories of futures that might or might not happen. I've met 2 other guardians, both like me, half in time and half out, bound to the fold, watching and warning. The mark on my chest has spread. It looks like frost patterns on a window, visible only in certain lights. Sometimes when I touch it, I can feel the presence at the heart of the fold, the vast thing that exists in all moments simultaneously. It's not malevolent. It's not benevolent. It simply is, like a force of nature, like gravity or electromagnetism. It doesn't want anything from us. It doesn't even acknowledge us most of the time. We are mayflies to it, creatures that live and die in what it perceives as a single instant. But when we intrude on its space, when we try to exploit it or study it or contain it, it defends itself, not out of malice, out of necessity. If humanity learned to manipulate the fold, reality would unravel. Causality would collapse. Time would become negotiable. The consequences would echo through all of history, changing past and future simultaneously until nothing remains stable. So I keep watch. I walk the boundaries. I warn the curious and turn away the foolish. I file my reports in the secret archives that only guardians can access. I exist in a state between linear time and temporal simultaneity, seeing enough of the future to prevent disasters and remembering enough of the past to understand why this duty matters. The 147 were right. Time isn't a line. It's a web. Every moment connects to every other moment. Causality flows in all directions. The past influences the future, and the future influences the past in an eternal dance of mutual definition. The fold is where that truth becomes visible, where the illusion of linear time breaks down and reality shows its true face. Most people can't survive that revelation. Their minds break trying to hold contradictory timelines simultaneously. But some of us can bear it. Some of us can become bridges between linear time and temporal simultaneity. We are the guardians. We are the watchers. We are the price humanity pays for having broken the ancient treaties and ignored the warnings that predated written history. If you're planning to visit Yellowstone, stay on the marked trails. If you see a road gated off with a Park Service personnel only sign, respect it. If you hear voices speaking in unison from nowhere and everywhere, leave immediately. If your watch stops and your GPS shows impossible coordinates, you're already in the fold and you need to retrace your steps before the mark takes hold. And if you see a ranger who looks like me standing at the edge of the woods, watching you with eyes that seem to reflect light in strange ways, listening to warnings I'm not allowed to speak aloud, please trust that I'm trying to protect you from a truth that would break you. The fold will be here long after I'm gone, long after you're gone, long after humanity is dust. It existed before the mountains rose, and it will exist after they erode to plains. It is not a place. It is a fundamental property of how time actually works, visible only in locations where the barriers between moments have worn thin. Yellowstone happens to be one such location. There are others scattered across the globe, all of them watched by guardians like me, all of them protected by lies and misdirection and classified files. I can't leave. I can't tell you the full truth. I can't show you the proof I've collected, because that proof would change you, would mark you, would make you a target for forces that exist outside of conventional time. All I can do is warn you. Zone 7 is forbidden for a reason. The rules exist for a reason. The boundaries are there to protect you from realities you're not equipped to process. My name is David Mercer, and I am a guardian of the fold. I exist partially outside of linear time. I remember futures that haven't happened yet, and I experience moments that already passed. I am bound to this place until another takes my place, or until time itself ends. This is not a punishment. This is not a blessing. This is simply what happens when someone opens their eyes to how reality actually works and survives long enough to accept the responsibility that comes with that knowledge. Time isn't a line. Time isn't a line. Time isn't a line. Welcome to Yellowstone. Stay on the trails. Follow the rules. And never, ever enter Zone 7, especially during the thin times. Some boundaries exist for a reason. Some doors, once open, can never be closed. Some truths will transform you into something that can barely remember what it was like to experience time in only one direction. I'll be watching. I'm always watching. I've been watching since before you started this video, and I'll be watching long after you forget you ever saw it. That's what guardians do. We exist in all the moments we're needed, protecting the boundaries, maintaining the seals, bearing witness to the price of modern arrogance and ancient wisdom ignored. Drop a comment if you've ever been to Yellowstone. Tell me if you've felt the fold calling to you. Tell me if your watch has ever stopped in the backcountry, or if your GPS has shown you coordinates that don't exist. Tell me if you've seen rangers standing at the edges of clearings, watching you with eyes that reflect wrong. I'll read them. I read every comment, past, present, and future. That's the burden and the gift of being a guardian. I exist in enough moments simultaneously to see you watching this video before you've clicked play and after you've scrolled to the next one. The fold remembers everything. I remember everything. Time isn't a line. Stay safe. Stay on the trails. And remember that some of the most dangerous places on Earth look like the most beautiful. Yellowstone will kill you in 100 different ways if you let it. But most of those deaths will at least leave a body behind. The fold doesn't even leave that. It just transforms you into something that exists in all moments simultaneously, unable to die, because death implies a linear progression from life to not life. And in the fold, both states exist at once. This is Ranger David Mercer, signing off. I'm still here. I'll always be here. That's the nature of being a guardian. We exist in all the moments we're needed, forever and always, protecting you from truths that would shatter your understanding of what it means to be human. Time isn't a line. The fold is real. The 147 are still there, transformed, watching, waiting. And I'm one of them now, in a way. Not fully unmoored, not fully linear. Something in between. Something new and old at the same time. A bridge between what you think reality is and what reality actually is when you strip away the comfortable illusion of linear causality. Stay curious, but not too curious. That's what got me here.